Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV WORLD at a new time, but bringing you, of course, the important stories of the hour and talking about things that, of course, need a lot of debate to understand them further. In our show today, we will be taking a look at two important topics. The first is, of course, with reference to what is going on in the country, the political scenario of the country, and what has engulfed the people and, of course, the courts and the political parties of this country for the past many days regarding, of course, the Supreme Court's decision of a PTI-backed candidate Faisal as being the new Chief Minister of Punjab, and also counting the votes that were earlier declared invalid by the Deputy Speaker in the previous session of the Punjab Assembly, which was declared as unconstitutional. And it was also something that the Supreme Court spoke about regarding Article 63A and what their earlier ruling meant as well, which means that, of course, the earlier votes that were discounted of the MOQ were then counted, and then we have Faisal as the new Chief Minister of Punjab. In the aftermath of all that, we've seen the response from the political parties, particularly the PDM as well, that earlier also boycotted the proceedings after the demand of full court was rejected. And now we've also seen statements coming in from the National Assembly, including from the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, who has talked about double standards coming in from the judiciary as well. And then, of course, the Foreign Minister calling for judicial reforms as to be important in the country, and also saying that this is something that needs to be dealt with in the Parliament, and has also called for the formation of a parliamentary committee on judicial reforms, the resolution for which has been unanimously approved. So we will be taking a look at all of this, and then, of course, trying and understanding the stances of the PDM and, of course, the political future of the country in response to this particular decision of the Supreme Court, and then, of course, also trying to understand the call for judicial reforms and whether or not we're going to, moving forward, be seeing any curtailing of the powers of the Supreme Court. So that's going to be under discussion in our first segment of the show today. In our second segment, we will be taking a look at the talks that have been continuing between the delegation of Ulemas from Pakistan and the TTP in Afghanistan, also with the support of the Afghan Taliban. Something that we have seen coming in terms of the reports coming in, talking about how they haven't really reached a breakthrough. But we're also hearing other reports contradicting such statements and saying that perhaps there have been progress. The talks have been conducted in a cordial environment and important issues were discussed. Whether or not the major demands that the TTP has put forward, including the restoration of the previous state of erstwhile FATA, and then, of course, the issue of carrying arms into Pakistan, whether or not these has been sorted out is still unclear, because, of course, we've been hearing statements from the Foreign Office saying that everything is happening under the Constitution and no extra constitutional demand is going to be fulfilled. So that's going to be our second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, I've been joined in the studios by Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. And for our first segment regarding the political situation of the country, we have been joined online by a guest. We've been joined by Irfan Qadir, who is an advocate of the Supreme Court. We've also been joined by Rana Ehsan Afzal Khan, leader PMLN, and Ali Rashid, who's a leader PPP. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us today. I'll start with you, Rana Saab. When we talk about, of course, what has happened so far, this decision of the Supreme Court, of course, hasn't been in favor of the PMLN or the other political parties of the PDM. You, of course, called for a full court, which was earlier also rejected. Then the proceedings were boycotted, and then, of course, we have a PTI-backed candidate as the CM Punjab at the moment. Following all of this, there is a lot of question that has been put forward in terms of the kind of double standards that have existed coming in from the judiciary, and, of course, the call for judicial reforms as well, which, of course, is putting under question a lot in terms of this particular decision, as well as the powers of the Supreme Court. What really currently is the stance of the political parties and the PDM with reference to this particular decision as well? And then, of course, the larger question of the powers of the Supreme Court in terms of decisions relating to the Constitution.
Okay. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. So regarding the decision, we feel that the previous decision of the Supreme Court on the interpretation of 63A, which was, and because of that decision, ECP denotified 25 members of PTI and also did not count their votes. So we feel that the letter was issued by the chairman of the party, the head of the party, and on the basis of that letter, this happened, that they were de-seated. And similarly, a similar letter was issued by Chaudhry Shujat Saab, but the Supreme Court took a separate decision. So that is, what we feel is contradictory in the two decisions. Secondly, we feel that the demand for a full court, if it were to be entertained, and let's assuming that the decision would have been the same, it would have been more transparent, considering that there's a feeling amongst our side of the party that this specific bench has been giving decisions against our party.
Right. So, Rana Sahab, if it was a full court bench, you mean to say that this decision would have been acceptable then?
And yes, of course. It would have been acceptable then. So that was one of our demands. Now, coming to the larger reforms, judicial reforms, we feel that there are two topics under discussion. Number one, it is the fact that a single person, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, has the authority to decide the bench. There are 17 judges in the Supreme Court, and it has been seen historically that certain specific judges are always included in all the benches. So to make it more transparent, the debate is that that authority should lie with the bench itself rather than a single person. And the second topic under discussion is about suo moto, that it is absolute discretion of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to take up a suo moto on a subject.
Yeah.
And then it seems that we have a history where we have had Doga courts and
right.
Judiciary has been.
Rana Sahab, that is quite intriguing an argument. I must give you that. But with due respect, after Dogar courts, I'm glad that you mentioned the courts headed by Honorable Chief Justice Dogar, that you called Dogar courts. But after that, you came into power. You came into power not once but twice, now actually thrice. But you haven't actually amended the Constitution. Despite 18th Amendment, you did include certain things, but then you had to cancel it out with 19th Amendment. And even after that, you had a lot of time to keep on adding or amending it. You did not. And secondly, yesterday, you're comparing yesterday's verdict with the previous one, but yesterday's verdict in that at the crucial moment, your party and other parties, allied parties, decided to boycott. When at the last moment, when you had to make all the difference, you walk out. Do you think that your case or your side can be heard?
I feel that it was a correct decision because the demand for a full court and the reasons given to reject that demand, that holidays are coming and it's going to take a longer period.
Sorry to cut you. I understand your faith in judiciary and your belief that had there been a full court, you would have gotten different kind of results. But is there any assurance? In this country, a full court actually sent a prime minister of the country to the gallows, right? So how would you be sure that the result would have been different? You can speculate, but you cannot be sure of that.
No, the demand was not for the result to be a certain way. That is what I've said just, right now, that if this decision would have come through a full court, then there would have been no debate, because that was our demand, that, this specific bench and the history of this bench making decisions, whatever decisions they were, but they were, we feel that they were against our party. And we feel that in this instance, the demand, which was also supported by, a lot of bars and the president of the Supreme Court bar and previous presidents as well, and the legal fraternity generally, the debate in all medias was that, there's no harm in allowing a full court on such a matter now.
All right. All right, let me also go to Adisam and talk to him about this, because of course at the end of the day, when we talk about the issue of the full court as well, this wasn't something that had occurred previously in the previous decisions, of course, as well, which were welcome and which were accepted. And so when we talk about this particular decision as well, and whether or not there was a full court, this is still a ruling that has come out from the Supreme Court, and as of now, it forms part of the law. But when we talk about what is being discussed in terms of the powers of the Supreme Court, in terms of the powers of the Chief Justice, all of that is now being put under question. Considering the fact that there is a call being given for judicial reforms, why do you think that this particular thing hasn't been done before, or the matter that whether or not this demand is now being put forward just because a decision has come out that isn't in the favor of the PDM?
And what would you say to the arguments that are given that your approach to policy making or decision making is still reactive, not proactive? Something happens, then you think about fixing that issue. Ali Rashid Saab.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. Yeah, I guess to start off with, I think the fact that all the other political parties were demanding a full court, and yet we were denied that option. I think since all the other parties wanted it and we were requesting, I saw no harm. Had they given the full court, I think the decision would be more acceptable to everybody. It's by denying the full court, I think it just made it a bit of a issue which other parties had with it, was because of the fact that they were denied the full court. Had the verdict been the same, and had it been the full court, in my opinion, things would be a bit different. People would be more acceptable and more open to whatever the verdict was, firstly. Secondly, I do agree that the way we've been, instead of being proactive, some places we are reactive, but we do realize things. And this is not just political parties. If you actually look at all the bar councils and the bar associations, they have an issue with this fact that only the Chief Justice has the authority to fix benches, where they've actually suggested that there should be 5 superior judges, the most senior ones, which should be doing so. So this is not just the PDM or political parties, but also the bar councils. And when it comes to the system, the bench and the bar councils and associations are very, on equal footing, where they get to decide what should be the way forward. And I think if it's causing a lot of, I think if this chaos can be avoided by these reforms in the future, so I think it's a good way forward. And we formed a committee which will be looking into it. And I think
Ali Rashid Saab, what has happened in these 3 months? Because if we talk about 3 months ago, there was a decision, and in which we hadn't had a full bench court, and of course the decision did not come in favor of PTI at that time, and at that time it was accepted by the PDM and all of the parties. They appreciated it of PDM at that time. What has happened in 3 months that after 3 months we were suddenly started?
Faisal, sorry to interrupt, but let me just go to Mr. Irfan Qadir. Mr. Ali, I'll come back to you. Mr. Irfan Qadir has just also joined us online. He's the advocate of Supreme Court, and he's also been, of course, the lawyer for the Deputy Speaker in this particular decision. Thank you very much for joining us in the debate, Mr. Irfan. When we talk about what has transpired since then, since this decision has come out, there's, of course, now talk of judicial reforms and this question of the judiciary and its powers, especially in terms of the Constitution. Can you clarify over here, when we talk about this particular decision, how or whether or not this was an act by the Supreme Court or a ruling by the Supreme Court that somehow interfered with the activities of the Parliament or the Constitution making activities of the Parliament, or whether or not this was just a reinterpretation or understanding of the earlier ruling that the Supreme Court gave regarding Article 63A?
I would say this was not the reinterpretation of earlier rulings or the Constitution or the earlier rulings of the Supreme Court. I mean, not the only, sorry, let me rephrase it again. That there was no question of constitutional interpretation in some of these rulings. It was the question of constitutional violation, or adding words to the constitution or rewriting the constitution. Not a single sentence can be added in the constitution by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court at the most is to follow what the constitution says. Supreme Court hasn't got the powers of the legislature that it starts its own legislation. So this particular judgment that became the basis of shaking the provincial governments in Punjab, the judgment of 17th of May 2022, this judgment, if you ask me, is void ab initio. And all the superstructure that has been built on this judgment, it's a basic principle of law all over the world that superstructure built on unconstitutional, illegal foundations must fall. And this is my prediction that all this superstructure very soon will crumble and will fall.
Right. Irfan Qadir Sahab, it is an honor to have you in the show. Earlier, before you joined us, I was saying to my colleagues here that you are like Thor's hammer. If you agree with someone, you are really very helpful. Otherwise, you can confront the people. You don't have any dearth of moral courage. But my question was regarding what you said and its implication. We are told that all these branches of government are co-equal. Your answers suggest that now they are no more co-equal, that Parliament is now no more supreme. Is it true, sir?
Absolutely. Now it appears that a Chief Justice, if he has two judges with him, then he can subjugate the Supreme Court, he can subjugate the executive, and he can subjugate the Parliament. So this is a unique form of evolution in Pakistan's political history. And in Bangladesh, this experience, I think, happened for some while when the Supreme Court itself declared its Chief Justice to become the President. But that is long time back. And in this evolutionary phase, they have gone way ahead in this constitutional progression as compared to Pakistan. But where Bangladesh was several decades ago, we have now reached that point. And it is a matter of serious concern for all concerned.
Right.
That,
But who are you going to blame for this? Only judiciary or then Parliament also, which did not do its job well, and that's why there are so many lacunas in the interpretation of the law or codification of the law?
I would blame many for this.
Yeah.
For example, there has always been rivalries among the top political leadership, and they have been using the judiciary for their own ends, and they have dragged the judiciary into political arena. And once judiciary enters politics, then it is the politics or politicians are not the sufferer. The sufferer is the judiciary, and that is exactly what has happened in Pakistan. And for the first time, many feel that independence of judiciary is also being impinged upon. And one of our former Chief Justices has to say that the fear is that the greatest apprehension that judiciary has, that is from within the judiciary. And I was wondering what he meant by this. Now I realize that he was absolutely right, that such absolute powers being used by one Chief Justice or two of his like-minded judges can impact the independence of the entire judiciary, because you cannot have an independent judiciary unless there is parity between the say of the Chief Justice and other judges, because it is the Supreme Court which consists of the Chief Justice and such other judges as are appointed from time to time.
Very right, sir. Irfan
Yes.
Saab, Irfan Saab, I just wanted to ask, if you rightly pointed out earlier about that legislator makes the laws, and obviously constitution is something that would be coming out of a parliament, not the Supreme Court itself. Supreme Court can only interpret what the law says. And if we talk about the judges, right now, of course, there were three judges. They interpreted the law, and they gave their own interpretation of it. Of course, one party was going to agree with it, the other party was going to disagree with it. So can we say that if it was a full bench, then there would have been more people to decide about what the interpretation of the law is, and that would have been more acceptable to all of the parties, or maybe just the one party, sir?
And Irfan, regarding, of course, the question of the powers of the Chief Justice and the fact that the three-member bench gave a decision, wasn't this something that had happened before? How come the question of these powers and the impact it has on the decision is being talked about now?
I have been asked two questions, and in the process, I have missed the first question. So kindly ask me first question again.
Sir, interpretation of the law, if it was the full bench, then of course it would have been more judges interpreting it, it would have been more acceptable to all of the parties?
Exactly. You see, this boycott, which the entire political leadership, a large spectrum of political leadership of the country had to boycott this decision, this is unprecedented in the history of Pakistan. Because if full court had been constituted, then nobody could raise an eyebrow that now justice is not being seen to be done. But once you show distrust in the majority of the judges and you bank only on three judges, then the entire brunt is also borne by those three judges. It would have been much better for the Chief Justice to have constituted full court. In that case, any decision, the brunt would have been equally divided, equally shared. So this, I think that independence of judiciary in Pakistan cannot be effectively secured unless the judges can exercise their decision making with equality. Otherwise, if one judge becomes overbearing, the other judges are weakened, then the independence of judiciary can never be secured.
Right. So, and Irfan Sahab, the answer to my question, or should I repeat it?
The Aapka, kindly let me have.
Right, sure. No, of course. With regards to, of course, this particular talk about the Chief Justice and the three-member bench giving a decision, how come this wasn't raised earlier? Because there was a decision earlier by a three-member bench as well that was welcome, that was accepted. There was no talk about how a full court would have had a more impartial, a more independent impact on the ruling. And whether or not, in your opinion, you think that the full court, this particular decision actually warranted a full court?
You see, when the first decision of 17th of May 2022 was rendered, that decision did not contain the detailed reasons. It was a short decision. And that decision was an outright violation of the Constitution. Once that was done, then subsequent, then everybody became wiser that one unconstitutional decision and then again the same bench, then again the same judges, then again the same judges. So then people realized that I would not say that their intentions were bad or that in any way the judges were somewhat mixed up with some sides. That is not the case. But these consistent errors of law being committed by the same bench again and again, that made many feel that Supreme Court bench was not seen to be neutral. And once that situation happened, the principle of law in such situation anywhere in the world is that where anybody has the slightest feel of remotest bias or attributes remotest bias to a judge, it is said that an honorable judge will not think twice and will step down without further ado.
But sir, doesn't that cause problems as well in terms of any and everybody also being able to raise questions and then that having a consequence of the judges stepping down?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Because you see, at this time what has happened, that the entire Bar Council, the Supreme Court Bar Association, Pakistan Bar Council, a large segment of our political leadership, and many others, and even judges. One of the judges has written a letter where he also felt that Chief Justice is taking decisions in isolation and judges are being isolated. So if they were all wrong and the only Chief Justice was correct, this is too much of a coincidence. I think Chief Justice requires introspection and need to rethink, and he should involve other judges also in the decision making, especially in the formation of benches and distribution of cases in the Supreme Court.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Irfan Qadir, and being a part of the debate and joining us for this particular segment.
I would like to go towards Rana Saab.
Yes, sir.
Rana Saab, you must have heard Irfan Qadir Saab. Obviously, he was talking to our the debate. He pointed out that the interpretation always comes from the judges, and judges should be non-biased. And in today's speech of Prime Minister in the Parliament, it said that obviously he highlighted that the judges have the double standards, and you would agree with it that he has stated it in the Parliament. I just wanted to ask from you, who would decide that which judges are biased and which judges are non-biased?
I think the judgments decide that. And how those judgments are perceived by the people of Pakistan, that perception decides that. And
people of Pakistan means all of the political parties, and of course people at large as well. And of course that there is polarization in the society.
Okay, for example.
And Rana Saab, that's a dangerous statement to make, because of course public opinion can sway both ways.
Let me tell you, for example, the fact that the election for the Chairman Senate, in which Yusuf Raza Gilani was a candidate and 7 votes were discounted, the fact that case has not been heard by the Supreme Court creates the bias. And why is it that that was not important? The election of the Senate chairman was not important enough to be heard. The fact that when the decision by a single member bench, which set aside the ECP's decision that those the ratio of the Punjab Assembly is being changed for those 5 reserved seats of women. So let the election happen, and according to the new ratio, we will announce who. And then we filed an intercourt appeal, and for that not to be heard so quickly, that makes the perception.
Right, and that is an amazing answer. Let me actually ask you another follow-up question, because earlier my question to Ali Saab was about being reactive, not proactive. And I recall last time all the coalition leaders actually spoke to press day before yesterday. I remember that at that time Mariam Sahiba actually said that we don't want to open too many fronts simultaneously. And I understand that you are actually locked in a fight against PTI. But all of a sudden, your guns have turned towards the judiciary, which actually brought you or helped bring you into power by ensuring that there was a vote of no confidence. Do you think that you have a strategy, or then you will fight with anybody who comes in the way?
Pitafi Saab, we were too involved in saving this economy. Believe me, the situation of the economy, it demanded all the actions that we've taken. As of today, I want to inform through your platform that in this month, we're almost going to have a 0 current account deficit. Next month, we're hoping to achieve a surplus. So with these interventions, we plan to stop the bleeding of the reserves. but it is, and we have stopped it, but it is this political uncertainty which is playing havoc with this economy. And we were focused to get Pakistan out of this mess. And on the other hand, we saw this judicial activism, which was not required and which has brought another, wave of political uncertainty.
No, I get it. But with your respect, you are a political party. Rana Sahib, you are a political party, and your actual constituents sit in an assembly, right? If you want to bring about any change, there is an assembly in Punjab. You can still do your magic and find a way to bring your candidate back to power. It's all number game, right? But instead of that, what we are hearing is how the thing was taken away from you.
Right.
Why not actually come up with a strategy where you can actually go for political solutions rather than anything else, legal solutions?
I agree that, we should be playing more of politics, and we should be playing more of propaganda rather than...
Absolutely. And Rana Sahib, I'll go to Ali Sahib now because he has been very patient for a long time now. So I'm just going to go to him and speak to him regarding what has been talked about by the PDM in terms of now what is going to be the future strategy and what is going to be the move forward. Whether or not we're going to be able to see any sort of real judicial reforms anytime soon. And then, of course, also the talk of Governor Raj, which is being spoken about, and that being a consequence or being talked about as the resultant consequence of anything that the PTI does, or is the kind of talk that the PTI is making. Is that a valid statement to make at the moment, or will it be a beneficial move for the country?
Are you standing with this decision or this point of view? But very quickly also, could you also clarify that Dari Sahib went to Dubai and came back? Can you clarify whether his visit had nothing to do with Pakistan's political future?
Not at all. His visit, actually, it was his birthday, and it's his first grandson. He couldn't go the last time, and it was his first. It was his birthday, so he just wanted to spend his birthday as Zardari Saab's birthday. He wanted to spend with his grandson. So it was a short trip where he just wanted to go there, and then it was announced. He said, "I'm going for this, and I'll be back." And coming to your second question regarding the reforms. Reforms. I'll address first because she had asked me that. The thing is, look, I'll ask a simple question. At some point in time, in the past 3 to 6 months, every single political party has had some issue with the Supreme Court and the chief, so if these reforms are going forward, I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a good thing because I think there's not a single party, including PTI, who had some issue. And when we were asking for the full bench or the full court, PTI also wanted it. The statement, they said, we don't mind. There should be a full court. Now, that's a big question mark. If all the parties, all the stakeholders, or all the people in the case are willing for a full court, why are they not giving us that? Why are we being denied that? So I think, these reforms are in place, and we will go forward with those reforms. And coming to the Governor Raj, I think there were very irresponsible statements, as usual, from PTI, saying that we won't let Rana Sahab enter Punjab. We will make sure that his entry from Punjab will be banned. To that, I think Rana Sahab said, if you go into any kind of adventurism like that,
are you saying that the statement wasn't equally irresponsible? Or that an irresponsible statement warrants an irresponsible statement?
Well, it's not irresponsible. Well, they should know that there will be consequences, right? If you will be
you were not
doing something silly, or if you would something which the country, you will not. Yeah, exactly. So Fawad Chaudhary said this, and in
very quickly,
that,
because
said,
you keep Ali Rashid Sahab, because you keep going back to the full court matter. One thing that I want to just actually reiterate here, and I hope you will agree, that a full court or full bench court is a privilege, it is not a right. You understand that, right?
Yes.
All right. This is going to be our last question since we're almost out of time for this segment.
Just the last one.
That was the last one, actually. We'll really have to move on to the next one. But thank you so much for joining us, Rana Ehsan Sab and Ali Rashid Sab, and being a part of the debate and talking to us regarding the political situation of the country and, of course, the aftermath of the Supreme Court's ruling regarding the elections of Punjab Chief Minister. We're now going to be moving on our topic with regards to what the Pakistan Taliban and the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and the Ulema in Pakistan, of course, have had their discussion in Afghanistan, the kind of statements and reports that have been coming out with regards to these meetings. Faisal, there have been contradictory statements that have been coming out. We've heard reports that there's no breakthrough. We've heard reports that the situation may not be as bad as being claimed, or that the reports coming out saying that the talks were not successful is, of course, not valid. We haven't really heard any major report as to what was being discussed, but what do you make of this particular move or this particular talk, and whether or not it is going to help in the larger or longer run for Pakistan? But before you answer that, let me also welcome in the show Tahir Khan, who's a senior journalist, and we'll be talking to him more about this as well, since he also talked about this on Twitter. Yes, Faisal, quickly.
Yes, Sana, at this hour, obviously, every little help matters, and of course the personalities that went there, they have their own weight, and of course they are respected amongst many of the Taliban leadership as well as TTP leadership as well. So it was a very positive step forward. While they were there, they of course met with them on a personal capacity. Of course they have that respect in front of them, and but when it comes to, obviously, the message from our side was that of course they had to come to table to talk terms with Pakistan, government of Pakistan, to negotiate peace and to drop the arms. And I think it was an excellent initiative, and this must not end here. More of the people must go and meet with them, and I think this is how we should move on.
All right. Tahir Saab, welcome to the debate. Of course, you've talked about the reports that have been coming in, or what is going on in terms of the talks between Pakistan Ulema and, of course, the TTP as well in Afghanistan, and the support of the Afghan Taliban. Can you further clarify the information that you have in terms of what is going on, what the talks have been, or any breakthrough that has been achieved? Because we've been hearing different reports that the talks haven't really been successful or haven't really gained any ground. But what do you know, and what are your reports?
Thank you for inviting me. I think those reports about the failure of the talks are not true. And I think one thing should be clarified, that this is not talks. Pakistan and the Pakistani institutions, they will be using all options which they think can bring some sort of positive results. So this delegation, 18-member delegation in Kabul, this is part of those efforts, how to convince the banned TTP to soften their position, because their one demand, they are insisting on one demand. Yesterday, they released a letter to the media, which they handed over to the Pakistani ulama, and they are emphasizing on one demand. That is the withdrawal of the merger of the former FATA with the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which I think is not possible, because this was not a decision of the government. It was a long process of discussion, then a amendment in the constitution. So this ulama delegation is like the one which was sent on June 1st. And second, they were in Kabul, and that was the tribal elders, some political leaders from the KP. So all these efforts are to convince the Taliban to stop their policies, their war, although there is now a ceasefire. But there is no doubt there are difficulties, there are problems, and this process is not very easy. It is complicated. It could be long, because this process started last year, and the state decided that now a stage has come to go for talks. And now the Afghan government, today the Pakistani ulema, they met with the Prime Minister of the Afghanistan interim government, Mullah Hassan, And they also, because I was in Kabul this month, and there was a second round of talks after the parliamentary approval that the security establishment can go ahead. So on 5th of July, the National Security Committee decided that the army can go ahead, whoever holding the talks. And
Yeah,
on 6th of July,
Tahir Khan Sahab, is it true that, with obviously forming or having back the former FATA area, and it should be out of KPK and it should have its own entity, is it true that they were obviously demanding to have their version of Sharia be imposed in there, similar to as there are so many states of America, they have different rules and laws for them states. They want to have a certain area in Pakistan where they can have their own version of Sharia imposed in there that is more similar to the Taliban's Sharia.
And Tahir Khan Sahab, Assalamu alaikum, Farrukh Pitafi here. Regarding former FATA, there were reports actually day before yesterday when the coalition partners were addressing a press conference. They were actually talking about the incident of extortion in ex-FATA and adjacent areas. Can you clarify what exactly is the status there as well, sir?
so if we go first to the extortion, yes, this has been happening, not now, but for years. And even I know that some people, even we know about several cases, even in the same area where I live, there was one person, one property dealer, who once said that he has received some phone calls, some messages. So this thing has been happening. But a few weeks ago, I saw a statement from the TTP spokesman, and he was asking the people that inform them if they received such call, if they received a call for money, for extortion. But this thing has been happening. But now I think it is reduced, because now if they are doing the same thing, so the people will be definitely informing the Afghan Taliban, because the Pakistani Taliban are there. There is no doubt now. So this is one thing that, yes, this thing has been happening, this extortion. And the second about Sharia, they in fact officially the TTP has not issued any list of demands, but they are only calling for this. They are opposing the merger, and they are demanding that this should be withdrawn. And in June, when the tribal elders met them, so the TTP chief, he was telling the Jirga that this is a red line for them. So that time, Barrister Saif, who was coordinating that particular delegation, he said that there is no red line in negotiations. And the TTP should also know, should also understand that they should make such demand which can be acceptable for the state. So they were in fact demanding, there were some reports that they were demanding the Sharia courts in Malakand. So this was their demand.
All right.
But
Tahir Sahab, earlier you started talking about how this particular initiative was not a failure. Can you further clarify exactly how this wasn't a failure? Because it seems that the demand of the restoration of the merger still exists, and that's one of their fundamental demands of the TTP, and one of the reasons why the talks between Pakistan and the TTP have been stalled, and we haven't really reached any sort of conclusion. So in what aspect do you think this particular initiative of the Pakistani Ulema going and speaking with the TTP was not a failure?
This, I told you, the Ulema delegation doesn't mean that there will be decisions, because the decision will be made by the state, by the parliament, and now parliament is involved. This was demand by the PPP, this was demand by the other parties. It has been a very old demand that the parliament should be involved in such kind of things, and the parliament is now part of this. This is one. Ulema delegation basic objective is to convince the Taliban, because many of these ulama, these 18-member delegation, many are their teachers. Like one is Anwarul Haq, Maulvi Anwarul Haq, who is from the Akola Khatak Madrasa, Jamia Haqqaniya, And many of the Afghan Taliban leaders, they are from there. They studied there.
Right. So have they had any influence on the TTP? Were they able to convince them?
Of course there is.
In what aspect?
When they are the teachers, and they would be giving them very solid arguments. Like in 2018, when there are 1,800 ulama, they released a fatwa, a religious decree. So because they were comparing the Afghanistan and Pakistan situation are different. That time there were many foreign troops. So the fatwa was that the suicide bombing, armed struggle, this is un-Islamic, not allowed in Pakistan, because Pakistan situation is not like that was in Afghanistan. So they have influence, yes, but I told you, this is not very easy. When I was in Kabul, I met with the Sirajuddin Haqqani, the interior minister. Who is the host? I asked him, if this is your personal initiative that you are hosting, he said no. When the Taliban took control of Kabul, there was an impression among the Taliban leadership, the Afghan Taliban leadership.
Right. I understand that, Aisab. I just want to understand that you're saying, of course, they have the ability to convince the TTP of something, whether or not they were able to do so, and if they were able to convince them of something, what exactly did they convince them?
And just to clarify this point, because essentially you said that the only bottleneck or only stumbling block was a reversal of Fatah reforms, right? And that they were not convinced. So now that the ulema have gone and spoken to them, and that decision still is not reversed, do you think that this influence, this shows lack of influence or diminishing influence?
No, I told you this process is not very easy. If Afghan Taliban can take 18 months with the in negotiation with the US and Qatar, so there would be some problem. I told you earlier that there would be problem, there would be complication, there would be tough demand. But Pakistani state, Pakistani government, Pakistani institution, they are using all options, the ulama, the jirga, the political leader, maybe there could be more delegation to convince them. And their demand should be based on reality, because Pakistan is a country, Pakistan has a constitution, Pakistan has a parliament. So when you are dealing with such kind of country, such a democratic country, so you should understand that you cannot
absolutely.
force
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Tahir Khan Saab, for joining us and being a part of the debate and talking to us regarding, of course, the initiative between the Pakistan ulama and the TTP that was held in Afghanistan. Whether or not we're going to be able to see any breakthrough or any sort of influence on the TTP still remains to be seen. But of course, we hope that we're able to achieve that so that we can deal with this once and for all. That's it that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow at 10.